We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered.
I know. I don't think I said edition right this time. Like, it just kind of all went into one. Like, what happened with our intro?
I know.
Are we still like feeling the effects of the Christmas holiday?
That's absolutely what it is. And we can say Happy New Year because this should be coming out on what? New Year's Eve?
New Year's Eve. Yep. Happy New Year's Eve.
That's how it goes when the last episode came out on Christmas Eve. So,
what will help you stay up to midnight more than 2 hours of Rob and Tom droning on?
That is certainly the case. It is minus 14 Celsius where I am. So that is, even for me, that feels cold. Let me do the conversion I have a range of temperatures from about minus 10 to about plus 25 Celsius where I'm okay. And I think I have a range from about 5 to 15 where I feel genuinely comfortable. So yeah, minus 14 is, that's downright cold. That's how that goes.
It was 20 when I woke up today, or 68 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to get up to 25 or 77 degrees
that's a little
Fahrenheit.
Uncomfortably warm. Especially in the winter.
I thought it was just fine. Thank you very much. I thought it was just as a Florida person, I have clothes for that. I do not have clothes for minus 14.
Yeah, your brain might, if you just walked out in minus 14, you might just go, this doesn't, like, what is this? I don't understand this sensation.
Why isn't there meat hanging all around me?
That's right.
Why is there not like one of those doors with a little push thing so you don't get locked in? Even though don't have any TV show
as long as I have my head covered in a toque and I'm wearing a jacket, my core temperature is pretty fine unless I'm out there for an extended duration of time. But I will tell you, your hands get cold quickly when you just go outside and have them exposed by gloves. I
know. I was wearing fingerless gloves while I was cycling this morning, and they got a little nippy. Got a little nippy. 68, 20 miles an hour on the bike.
I still haven't turned the heat registers on in my apartment because I'm in an apartment. The heat comes in under the door. What do I need my own registers for? They're electric. Why spend the electric bill?
There's different kinds of people, you know, and I cycle with this group of people, and there's a whole bunch of them. Today was probably 40, 50 large in this group that I was cycling with, which is way too many people. Just far too many people to get through a light all at the same time.
That's a gaggle of cyclists at that point.
That is a gaggle. That is that's a bus. It's like a double bus length of people, but like longer.
Yeah.
And it takes longer to get going and doesn't go as fast. So, but some of them, like, they refuse to wear, like, they have cycling, I don't know what you would call them. They're sandals. They look like I used to have a pair of like Clark's, like, leather sandals that had like back strap and stuff like that. And they're a little bit more, you know, robust or whatever, but these are those almost, but with cleats on the bottom so they can click into their little pedals and stuff, and they cycle in that. And when it's actually cold, like, you know, are cold.
Yeah, not 20 degrees.
Not 20 degrees.
Celsius.
Lower than that. 20 degrees is great.
Yeah, that should be darn comfortable.
It's very comfortable. I could do that all day long. So I will say, if you were looking at the YouTube video, you might see something on my finger.
Oh, okay.
I have maybe damaged a whole bunch of ligaments in that finger. Climbing, which was an inevitable thing that was going to happen to me because I am too old to be doing some of these things that I do, and definitely too stubborn not to do them. And even when I know I'm hurt, I probably should stop, and I'm like, it'll probably be fine. So we'll see if I need surgery or not. We'll see. This has been like a 2.5 weeks, but I've been in a sling for about a week now, and I guess it's getting better. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, dear.
We shall see. But anyways, I hate saying anyways because it's not a word. It's anyway. But then I say it, and I wish I didn't. So I will try. I will endeavor to stop. You guys should start taking shots every time I do that. So that'll be not
Add
that
to the
will
drinking
in
game.
any way. any way and inform me about how much I do it, I will endeavor to stop anyhow.
Okay.
This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask yes by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to avrant.com and view our website, which has the comments turned off because of Russian bots or Chinese bots or Indonesian. I don't know where the bots come from. They come from a place or many places or all of the places. I don't know. Could be USA bots. Should be very patriotic, I suppose. But I shut it down for that. You can go to facebook.com/AVRant podcast, youtube.com/AVRant, where you can see our desynced lips saying the words that you are hearing in the podcast.
And hopefully not another edit, because we're hoping Skype won't crash this time. We did one little change behind the scenes, but
we have had Skype crash at like the 25-minute mark.
Yeah.
For about a month and a half, ever since Windows updated.
That's right.
The most recent time. And so I have updated my Skype to a different Skype, and hopefully that will make a difference. But we will see in 19 minutes.
That's right.
That works or not.
We'll be watching.
Contact Rob directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter's at First Reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's at avrant_Tom. And if you've been following me on Twitter, as you all should, you know I finally posted something this week.
Oh, okay.
So, well, I posted it to you.
The response to me. All right. I didn't know that's what you meant.
That was my big thing. That's what I meant.
Okay.
We want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. Just on the right side there, it looks like a cup of coffee with our logo in it, which I photoshopped myself. I have a weird hair.
Yeah.
And if you do that, it'll take you to a PayPal donation site. So we had 3 of those for the Christmas day. Thank you very much to all of our everybody who listens to the podcast, and especially thank you to Bob, Billy, and Jason who gave us PayPal donations. Now, Bob in particular said he likes the notion that anytime we save someone money, we deserve a tip. So we told him to wait on buying a new receiver because of the whole HDMI 2.1 situation, and to wait for some NHT Super Zeros to come back in stock. Both pieces of advice saved him money, so he gave us a tip. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, Billy. And thank you, Jason.
Yes, indeed, Bob, Billy, and Jason. Thank you all very much for those PayPal donations. We appreciate the financial support. Skype is glitching. Hasn't crashed, but it's glitching.
It's already glitching. It hasn't crashed yet.
That's the trade-off.
I was like,
maybe this one won't crash, but it'll just be all glitchy.
I looked down because there's a little light underneath the Skype thing that tells me whether or not I'm waiting for it to go dim, but it didn't go dim, and then suddenly your voice came back. So we also want to thank our 137 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you can sign up to be a monthly subscriber. Or, whatever. Anyways, so every month they take some money from you, however much you designate, and give most of it to us, a minimum of $1. So we want to thank our 137 patrons, including Bertrand. So thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, big thanks to our 137 patrons over there, Bertrand. Thank you for being one of them.
That's right. I did want to mention, for those of you who have forgotten or maybe don't know, if you are talented or good or just have some pictures of your AV gear in any way that you are okay with me using on avgadgets.com, just to have as cover art or to have as art within an article, if you would like to send that to me, Tom at AV, you can send it to Tom at AV Gadgets or Tom at AVRant or question at AVRant. You can send it to all of them. It'll get to me somehow. Then, and with a disclaimer, with a note that says you can use these in perpetuity. I don't care. They're yours. Have at it, Tom. Then I may use them in my articles, and you will get a thanks on this podcast. And I am very cautious too, because some of the articles that I write are not positive about things. Like when I say things like in-wall subwoofers are a terrible idea, which I think is one of my articles. I don't know if that went in public yet, but stuff like that. If you sent me a picture of an in-wall sub, I tend not to want to use your picture for those things, because I feel like that's insulting to you, even though it's not really meant to be. So I am sensitive about those things. So if you do that, I just want to mention to you, if you've got some pictures of your home theater gear, it could be as anything from a port to a knob to a driver to the whole room. If you've got some stuff, just send it to me.
Yeah.
So we also got
somebody sent something in this morning, but I didn't put it on the list because I cut off what goes on the list on Sunday night. So it'll be next week that'll get mentioned. So I haven't forwarded it to Tom yet. It'll get forwarded.
I look forward to mentioning you next week. Whoever you are, that's exciting for me. So, and I do tend to use those photos, and some of the photos I tend to use more than others, but that has more to do with my naming convention than anything else. So I try to name them pretty well. We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during our ongoing and seemingly ever worsening pandemic. I guess we're back to worsening.
Yeah,
it looked like things were getting better.
It was for a little bit.
I'll tell you, here in Florida, we have a very ostrich approach about this whole thing. No one's talking about it in Florida. There ain't nobody down here. This holiday season, it's just like people are just they're just meeting with their friends and their family and stuff like that. They ain't doing nothing. I mean, I have been to grocery stores and stuff where it's just like just walk in and go, yeah, no, I'm not going to be here. Walk back out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a little crazy here, but we got some notes of gratitude, so we want to thank the people who have thanked us. Joseph Martin, who says he's in Ireland, and, well, I mean, he doesn't say he is in Ireland. He says he's very happy with the Panasonic UB450 Ultra HD Blu-ray player that we told him to buy. Jonathan with the CDN 4.0 says it came out great, and he's thrilled with his updated, undestroyed theater.
Mostly room.
I guess yeah, room. Yeah. Bob Angel, Angel. I don't know how you're supposed to say it. Hoping we both have a wonderful new year. Brad, Infinite Gary, Zach, Billy, who thanks us for being generous with our time and expertise, Gurinder, and Jeremy. So let me do that again. Joseph, Martin, Jonathan, Bob, Angel, or Angel. I don't. There's no one that says it that way. Brad, Infinite Gary, Zach, Billy, Gurinder, and Jeremy. So thank you for thanking us.
I'll say it one more time. Joseph, Martin, Jonathan, Bob, Angel, Brad, Gary, Zach, Billy, Gurinder, and Jeremy. Thank you all very much for sending in those notes of gratitude to us. A big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. And before we hop into the news... Is it Optimus time?
Oh, here we go.
I think we have to show.
It's time.
In fact, I got a request to show what I got for myself for Christmas. So you know what? Tom's face is going to disappear. I'm going to switch over to a camera of just me because it's a pretty sizable toy here. So yes, anybody from the 80s or even modern times.
Look at this thing.
It's
so huge.
Who that is? Yeah, it's a big toy. That is, Optimus Prime. He's not exactly light either. He lights up, as you can see. Got lights there, and
oh yeah, I can see
out
it.
of the
yeah,
back there. Yep, got tail lights there.
Tail lights.
I mean, this is okay. We've seen Optimus Prime toys before. Okay, I'm gonna attempt this. This is probably not gonna go well. This is probably a really bad idea. Okay, and you're gonna want to see the video for this, and I might even on YouTube splice in the very short little demo I did that I put up on Twitter. But okay, I'm gonna
that you put on Twitter.
I'm gonna see if this works. Holding him up, he is meant to be on the ground when this happens. But okay, hey Optimus Prime.
Greetings.
Transform.
Oh my God. You were going to drop this thing.
I know. Okay, he went.
This is going horribly.
Okay.
Wait. Oh, there he is. He got around. You almost beheaded your Optimus Prime.
Not beheaded, but yeah, when he twists around,
you were holding on to his neck. I'm
holding on to the stalk at the back. He's got kind of a handle. All right, it's not a great idea to hold him up while he's doing that. But okay, so not only does he transform in his own. Hey, Optimus Prime. Oh, hey, Optimus Prime.
Greetings.
Say hello.
Greetings, people of Earth.
Oh, dude, got a little attitude there. Got a little head nod going on.
And okay, this is probably a really bad one to try, but it's fun.
No.
Yeah.
What?
Okay. Hey, Optimus Prime.
Greetings.
Megatron.
Megatron must be stopped.
He puts his little fists up.
I very nearly hit my microphone there, but yeah, there he is. So yes, fully articulated. Okay. I think it's 22 servo motors in there that move him around. There is an app that you download where you can remote control him and make his truck horn go off and stuff. But mainly you can program your own movements through the app, and you can download additional movements. And yeah, it's a whole fun thing.
I think Rob's showing this off on the podcast so he can write it off on his taxes as part of something.
Yeah, it's not cheap. But yeah, I'm gonna. I might leave him powered on because otherwise he'll probably fall over because the servo's kind of shut off when the power goes out. So he's going to be standing over there. I'm not going to transform him back into a truck while holding him because I attempted that and that went horribly. So yeah, he needs to be on the ground.
Bye, Optimus.
When that happens. And not only does he need to be on the ground, he really needs to be on flat, hard ground because even on low pile carpet, he gets stuck something because things are meant to slide along the ground. So yeah, Optimus is gonna stand down below me or something like that and keep guard. And there you go. That was my Christmas present to me.
Okay, that's fantastic. If you guys have ever seen the TikTok thingy or whatever it's called with the people who are like, now that I'm an adult, but the problem with being an adult is now I have adult money and I spend it on kid things. You're looking at it. That's what that was. That's what was happening there. All right, so while Rob's fixing his camera and apparently petting his Optimus Prime, I'm going to go on with the news here. I think Rob, is it attacking you, Rob?
No, definitely not attacking. If anything, it's going the other direction. When he becomes self-aware, this will be his excuse for why he does eventually attack me. Is how I just treated him. There you go. All right. He's all right.
TPS, Transformer Protective Services. In the news, for those of you that haven't been paying attention, TCL's R546 and R646 TVs with Google TV are back. If you remember, they're on the Best Buy store shelves again. They were pulled earlier this month after lots of complaints about the slow, buggy interface, then system crashes, and TCL says they fixed it and now have significant improvements to stability and speed. And if you held onto one of those TVs that you already bought, you'll get the firmandware update that's available like right now. I guess it's if you can get it to turn on.
But it turned on.
I know.
And actually, if you weren't using the built-in apps, you might not have even noticed that anything was not that great. But that's good. They're back. They are one of the models I kind of like to recommend because like the 6 series anyway, the R646 has all the latest gaming features and it's a darn good television. It's just flat out for not that much money. So yeah, glad those are back and glad things appear to be fixed.
Good. HDMI licensing administrator. Is that a thing? I thought it was group.
Well, no, because there's HDMI LA, that's the licensing administrator, and then there's HDMI LLC, which is the thing that actually hands out the licenses. Officially, it was HDMI licensing administrator that made this announcement, so that's what we'll go.
So they had a
webinar,
like a Zoom call, or webinar. One at a time I could not go, and I really didn't want to go anyways because I knew I'd just get mad. Anyways, they announced a new spec. So if you remember last week, we talked about how HDMI 2.0 and 2.1 are now the same thing,
right?
So now they have an HDMI 2.1a because this is going to make things much better. In case you're wondering,
fix everything.
As HDMI does, whenever they announce something, everybody just gives a big round of applause and talks about how great they all are for clarifying things and making things easier and not at all more confusing. So, HDMI 2.1a is on the way. There's some minor updates to existing features like power over HDMI and quick media switching, which literally I've never heard anybody talk about until this very moment, but I know it exists. The main new feature, though, is SBTM, which is source-based tone mapping. Source-based tone mapping, SBTM. Rolls off the tongue. I want to thank them for that. They couldn't have come up with any better acronym at all because
initialism, not an acronym, because we're not going to say
whatever. It's dumb.
Yeah.
Is a protocol that standardizes the handshake between source and device so the source can know the display's HDR capabilities and then perform tone mapping of HDR content in the source prior to sending it to the display. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's basically player-led Dolby Vision and HDIG, or HDR Gaming Interest Group, are a similar idea. But this is at the HDMI spec level, so it's no longer exclusive to a proprietary standard. One of the main reasons they're adding this feature is because it will make it possible to have an HDR window and an SDR window both on screen at the same time, or to have an HDR preview video playing while the menus remain in SDR, blah, blah, blah. I could not be more underwhelmed by this. I mean, I couldn't I am so glad I didn't waste my time going to this stupid thing, because I would have been so mad.
It was quick. It was only like 45 minutes, including the questions. So
it's a lot of time for me to talk about source-based tone mapping. I mean, so the upside for all of you people who are like, how come my menus look stupid? And this has really been an issue with some systems, some solutions. So I am glad that at least now that they'll be able to have a way of showing menus on top of HDR things.
And it's also the thing where like you're navigating through menus and then a preview video starts playing and your TV blanks out for a moment and then comes back in HDR mode. And then when you navigate to the next movie and its video preview plays in SDR, your TV blanks out for a moment and then comes back in SDR mode. This avoids all that. Your TV under this, if this is what's going on, if your source ends up being compatible and it uses this source-based tone mapping protocol, your television will just stay in HDR mode 100% of the time. But the source will look at the content and it knows supposedly the capabilities of your television. Like we've already seen with player-led Dolby Vision and with HGIG that the information that gets sent to the source from the display isn't always the most accurate. You're just relying on the manufacturer to have programmed that correctly and actually feed correct metadata back to the source device. But if it did, then the source would be able to do the tone mapping ahead of time. So it is just a single HDR stream of data that's coming out of the source, but things that are supposed to be an SDR have already been like pre-made into the SDR format instead of, coming out as a switch between HDR format and SDR formats.
Okay. Monoprice has listed new Monolith Class-D Hypex N-Core amps on their website. Both are 8-channel models, and according to an Audioholics interview with lead designer Hobie
Seacrest.
Seacrest. I was never going to get that from those letters in that order.
That's how it's spelled, so I wasn't going to misspell his name, but I guess I could have made it phonetic.
It's fine. Hobie Seacrest, which is actually the name of my boat. They are indeed made in partnership with ATI, just like all other Monolith amplifiers, but they have some significant differences. The 8x100 watt M8125X, and the thing I do like about Monoprice, and for the most part Emotiva naming conventions, is that you can tell exactly what you're getting from the model name. So M, it's a monolith amplifier. 8, number of channels. 125 watts per channel, which is not what this thing is, but whatever.
Well, yeah, they're kind of saying it might be. The final specs haven't been listed yet. So
all right. So anyway, so it's going to be somewhere around 125 watts, and then X because of course, and it's $2,000. And it doesn't have an ATI sister model, so this is just for them. Unlike ATI's Class D offerings, it uses a switch mode power supply with a 20 amp inlet and only has XLR inputs, no RCA inputs at all, which is very convenient for just about nobody. The 8x200 watt M8250X, I guess they're rounding up, $3,000, should be similar to ATI's AT52X series, lowercase instead of uppercase X for some reason. But again, it uses a switching mode power supply and has dual 20 amp inlets, still XLR only. So again, all of those people who insist on having nothing but XLR definitely want Class D amps to go with them, because that's how those people work. In case you're wondering, the mindset, that's the mindset.
The Hypex N-Core definitely are the upper tier of remaining very, very linear into just about any darn speaker load that you might connect them to. These sort of have a 3RU chassis if you take the feet off, and I think there are optional rack ears that'll be available for these things. And then I think the 125 and 250, because I mean, right on their one website, they're listed as 8x100 and 8x200, but I think the 125 and the 250 are 2-channel driven type of specs instead of all channels driven. So in any event, pretty darn powerful. Definitely going to be physically smaller and not as heavy as the other monolith amplifiers. That's sort of the big deal. But then seeing those dual 20 amp inlets on the back of the M250X, that's a whole lot of electricity going into the back of that thing. So you're gonna have to be prepared for that if you're planning to plug it into your wall.
Right. It's not just, you can't just plug it into the old thing. Anyways, the full specs and expected launch dates are not yet listed. So it's not on here. It just says coming. Is that what it says? Coming soon?
Well, yeah, I'm like, they have, Monoprice always puts an ETA, but they've put it as December 31st, 2022. I do believe it will be out before then. Well,
a year from now. It'll be out a year from now.
Clearly a placeholder.
These are good looking amps. I mean, I like the front plate. I think it looks nice. It's got a single button, which is pretty much all you need on the amplifier, to be honest with you.
On and off.
I do not love that it's just XLR inputs on the back.
Yeah, a little bit strange, actually, because the ATI Hypex Encore Class-D amplifiers have both XLR and RCA inputs, so that was a choice. I get maybe it keeps the cost slightly down.
I don't know. I mean, there's no reason why you can't just buy RCA to XLR cables and plug it in. Like I said last week, I think, when I was making fun of somebody else complaining about it, you know, the stuff. You really don't need XLR anything in your home theater ever. So the noise rejection is not needed, even in the worst of installations. Like I love it. Like, oh well, you know, you have to have your power cords and your speaker cables at right angles, or you'll get interference. I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, if you had like an extension cord curled up on the ground, and you know, spools of speaker cables coiled up around it, maybe, but you know, whatever. Some comments here from some of our listeners. Zach shared an update after our advice last week regarding Apple TV Plus, the Apple TV Plus app on his NVIDIA Shield, and how it was still producing judder on his C1 OLED even after manually setting the Shield to output 24 Hertz. Rob, I guess, worked with them and said to uninstall the app, but then also manually delete the app's cache and local app data. On that front, Zach can share a tip. If you go into the apps page in the Shield's menu, not the main page, but the list in the menu with all of the apps, including all the Android stuff that's running in the background, if you highlight the app you're going to uninstall, you can hold down the OK button on the remote, and a context menu will pop up that lets you erase the cache and local data from there. So not as much digging as Rob had warned about. Anyways, he fully deleted that. Anyways, doesn't count. I'm reading that. I'm reading that one. I didn't say that one.
Okay.
That wasn't off of me. That's from Rob. That's Rob's anyways.
There you go.
That's his problem. He fully deleted the app and all of its data, and then set his Shield to output 23.976 Hertz, which is exactly the number it's supposed to, whatever. And then reinstalled the app, just like Rob said, and it worked. No more judder, but what a process. Has Rob had to do that with any other apps? Have you, Rob? Have you had to do that with any other apps, Rob? Have you?
Yes, with the Crave TV app, I did have to do that with that. That is not available in the States. That is a Canadian service, but I did have to do it with that. So yeah,
my coffee is very cold. It's basically iced coffee. It just needs ice, and it will be iced coffee. Lastly, we said his Denon X4300H should be able to pass through whatever type of video his Shield is outputting, so it shouldn't be necessary to rely on HDMI ARC. But it just won't pass through Dolby Vision for some reason. He really liked to be able to use Plex and have both Dolby Vision and lossless Atmos. A new receiver will eventually make that happen. Really? 4300H can't pass
I know.
through Atmos?
Yeah. So that was I mean, 1 year after. Vision? Yeah, like I've got a Marantz SR7010. So that was the next year was when the Odyssey Editor app came in. So I can't use the Odyssey Editor app on my Marantz SR7010. The 4300 was that model year, the first year that the Odyssey Editor app was available, but it was still using the HDMI 2.0 boards that, for whatever reason, just aren't happy with 12-bit signals. And when you're using Dolby Vision from an NVIDIA Shield, it is definitely a 12-bit signal, and that does seem to be the problem.
So can you use Dolby Vision with somebody else, from another source, and it will work?
If it's, say, an Xbox that you manually set to output no higher than 10 bits, it works. it can technically send Dolby Vision through, but not if it's a 12-bit signal. And the NVIDIA Shield will only output Dolby Vision as a 12-bit signal. So I have that same issue with my Marantz SR7010. So technically, on paper, Dolby Vision support is there, but not as a 12-bit signal.
I will have that problem as well if I ever get to that.
No, don't you have a 44?
We have this discussion every
time?
single time. Every time, Rob.
I always forget.
Rob, why don't you go ahead and buy me a 44 or 45 or 46 or whatever?
47
it is
by this point.
47.
But we're going to wait for the 48.
We are. We might be waiting for the 5,000. The way I'm going.
You'd get a new projector before you get a new receiver. So.
I know, absolutely. Dazz, okay, questions here. Questions. Onto your questions. We have no idea what time we're at because my internet went out. I was so excited because Skype didn't close. I was like, oh, it's like
I thought, because on my end, Skype just went out again. I was like, oh, Skype went out again. But
no. But on my end, Skype was still up. It was still going, but my internet went down for like 10 minutes.
Fabulous.
So couldn't figure out. I reset my modem and whatever. Everybody in the house was complaining about it. Because I have people in my house because of holidays. My children are 2 of my 3 children are home. Dazz, just a comment. I almost said compliment, but compliments. Who's giving us those? Dazz said just a comment first. It's been a while since he took his whole family out to a movie theater, but they decided to go see Spider-Man No Way Home, and they went for a Dolby Cinema to get the best experience. He spent a lot of time in his home theater throughout this pandemic, and now the commercial movie theater, even this Dolby Cinema, has lost a step for him. He always gets the best seats at home. His base, it's better. It just is. The Dolby Cinema he went to wasn't using their motorized masking, and you can notice the black bars, and his Epson 5040 UB can show HDR just as well, and on a screen at his home, it looks sharper. So it was an interesting realization for him, but the movie itself was 10 out of 10, so no regrets. So he thought the bass was better at home.
Yeah.
Dazz has a whole bunch of subwoofers, doesn't he? Though?
No, I mean, he's still using his SB12 NSDs in his basement theater, so.
All right.
Yeah.
He's got a question. We said last week that if he's able to make the panels on his front walls thicker by 2 inches, that would be better. But when he was making his first batch of DIY panels, he was more worried about how many square feet he was covering rather than what frequencies he'd be absorbing. Now that he's comfortable making frames and panels, should he reframe his existing 2-inch panels to make them thicker? He wouldn't even consider it an inconvenience, and he finds the whole process fun. So what do we say? Is that 2 inches thicker with an air gap, or just 2 inches thicker? Because if it's just 2 inches thicker, then you could just add an air gap.
2 inches thicker with an additional air gap.
With an air gap, then yeah, I mean it would be. I mean, if you don't mind doing it, I would say knock yourself out.
Yeah,
I think it would be great.
The thicker is better. You can't really, in terms of the treatment itself, go too thick. You can obviously go too thick in practical terms and in expense terms, but in terms of what those panels are absorbing, you can't really go too thick. So if it's no skin off your back to go ahead and make those panels thicker, it would be beneficial. In all likelihood, it'd be beneficial because we do very often in a lot of rooms, if we happen to get down to Bertrand's question, we'll be talking about this. It's in that crossover region between the subwoofer and speakers, that 80 to 100 hertz region. That's very often where we see a lot of issues in the rooms, and it's difficult to absorb that with passive treatments because they need to be a good, 4 inches of insulation with an air gap to sort of reach that 80 hertz mark. About 6 inches thick in total is kind of where we're trying to get to with that, or thicker. Thicker would also work, but practically speaking, we don't usually go much thicker.
Which is why we like the corner traps.
Yeah,
yeah. Chad is planning for a dedicated theater room. It's about 12 feet wide by 16.5 feet long. He's just going for a single row of seats, and his hope was to follow all of Dolby's guidelines really closely, not how they position their speakers. Okay.
Well, in the visual, in terms of how they describe it in the text, that would be fine.
Yeah, that would be fine. So his current plan includes a false wall that's a 1.5 feet deep with an acoustically transparent 110-inch screen. With his planned seating distance, that gives him a 45-degree field of view, and his front, left, and right speakers will be on the outside edges of the screen. The diagram shows them closer to the corners than they will actually be. They'll be hidden by grill cloth and the framing for the false wall going wall to wall all the way across. Okay. So we can kind of see here. Yeah, so the room is wide, longer than it is wide.
Yep.
The door is like almost smack dab in the middle of the right wall, but it opens to the outside.
Yes.
And he's got panels, looks like everywhere, if I'm understanding what I'm seeing.
It sure looks like it, yep.
Which is great, okay?
Yeah.
I do think you need panels in your corner, but other than that, I don't really see... Where's the subs? Are they both at the front of the room, or there are four?
I
of them?
think there's 4 of them. Yeah, there's 2 at the front on either side of the center, and 2 at the back, mirroring the placement. So 4 subs,
which would be great.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And
you can do this. This is a thing you can do.
Visually, the front of the room will look as though the screen is just mounted on the front wall, but that front wall is actually going to be acoustically transparent. It is not drywall, and the screen is acoustically transparent. So behind what looks like the front wall is 1.5 feet of space where his 2 of his subwoofers and 3 of his speakers will be hiding back there.
Let's just be sure we can fit those things back there. Let's just start with that. You got to give yourself enough room back there.
Oh, should be fine.
He'd like to have a 7.4.4 configuration. He was planning to use a single subwoofer output into a mini DSP to handle tuning the bass. Do we think an Onkyo receiver with Dirac would be a good choice? Anything to keep an eye out for at CES in January? Not that I'm aware of as far as CES. No one's really talked about anything other than whether or not they're even going to... Like, the last article I read about CES was like, they're probably still going to hold it.
Well, virtually, if nothing else. A bunch of companies have pulled out of in-person events at CES, but they'll still be doing virtual online events. So CES will take place in some form, but the in-person event will be smaller because lots of companies have pulled out. We have heard about a planned RZ70 model that will come in above the Onkyo RZ50. It's rumor at this point, we don't know for sure, but the rumors about that is that it will be a 13-channel model, or it might be 11 amplifiers built in but capable of processing 13 channels. And that one of the options with those additional channels would be to use the Dirac Live bass management, which would be an add-on. You'd have to pay to add on Dirac Live bass management because not everybody needs it. But that supposedly that's all the rumors about what the RZ70 will be. That might get announced at CES. It's not out of the question, but we don't know for sure if that'll be the case. But that would be a thing to potentially keep an eye out for on this specific front. But barring that, I mean, the thing is, he wants to do 7.4.4 anyway. He doesn't want to do 9.4.4 or 7.4.6. So you need 11 speakers. And if you are going to take the single subwoofer output and put it into a mini DSP 2x4 to do the bass configuration, that's going to be great. You don't need Dirac Live bass management at that point. In fact, if you get the 2x4 HD, if you want to, you can upgrade the mini DSP 2x4 HD to Dirac Live with bass management if you wanted to. So you still have the same capabilities available to you, but I would just use the free multi-sub optimizer software with the mini DSP 2x4, and I would be complete. I mean, especially with the setup that you've proposed in this perfectly rectangular room, I don't think you're even going to need it. I think placement alone.
That's what I was going to say.
I think placement alone means you can mono signal and you're done.
Mono signal out to a double splitter or triple splitter is what it needs in order to get it out to 4, right? And then you send it out to the 4 different subwoofers. And I mean, if you have them, I mean, they're not exactly mirrored placement in this image, but I see no reason why they couldn't be mirrored placements.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so I mean,
I think this was like done by hand in a program.
And that's fine. That's fine. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. Yeah. So, you know, if you were to perfectly mirror place them, that you might not, I mean, you might go through the whole process of getting Dirac whatever and doing the thing and go at the end and go, it didn't need anything. Yeah. You've got 4 subs that are properly placed in a rectangular enclosed room. You really don't need much more than that. Everything else is just going to be like slight little tweaks. And to me, the cost, and I'm not talking just the cost of getting the mini DSP and the Dirac Live on top of everything, but just the cost and time and effort to make it sound subjectively not any different. Maybe objectively it's better, a better line. I don't know that it would be worth it for. I know it wouldn't be worth it for me.
I would definitely try just one subwoofer output feeding the exact same mono signal to all 4 of your subs, and I would just try that. Play the sweeps, listen in each seat, and see if you need to do anything further. Now, if you end up adding a mini DSP, that's not a crazy high cost to add to that. I mean, the multi-sub optimizer software is free, so I have no qualms with that. If you're like, I think this could be a bit better, you know, the uniformity could be a bit better seat to seat. Okay, that's not going to be some huge investment. But I definitely don't think you need to specifically look for Dirac Live bass management. That really shouldn't be necessary here. Do I think going for, say, the Onkyo RZ50 that's available, well, you can order it now, whether it'll actually ship anytime soon, but you can order it now, whether that would be good. I do think that would be a good choice, simply because it's got the 3 HDMI 2.1 ports built into it, and if you want to have that switching available to you, it's one of the few games in town that actually has properly functioning HDMI 2.1 switching. If you can find one. So, I mean, I'd be very happy getting an Onkyo RZ50, having Dirac room correction as your room correction program for the rest of your 11 speakers. That's going to be great. So I think if you went for that, plus the, I mean, try it without the mini DSP first, because you really might not even need it. But then if you do get it, that would be the add-on. And I don't think you need to go and wait specifically for the RZ70 or worry that you have to go even higher end for something with Dirac Live Bass Management. I think you're fine with this current plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you, with all the room treatments you're already planning in here, and then what we're going to talk about, it seems probably happening behind your false wall, which could be an entire bass trap. The entire
That's you have a foot and a half.
Yeah, you're a foot and a half of potential insulation back there. I really don't feel like you're going to need all this, but maybe you will. He says, what should he use to insulate behind his false wall? Does he need to find black insulation so it won't bounce any light back through the acoustically transparent screen? First of all, I don't know that black insulation exists.
Yeah, not like matte black. The Roxel is darker in color. Like, it's not the yellow or white or pink. It's sort of a grayish.
If you were super worried about it, you could put like more speaker grill cloth on top of it, but you're already...
Well, I mean, I would just make sure, because any of the acoustically transparent screens, if it doesn't come automatically, at least optionally have a black backing layer. Pretty much for this reason of, if you have a speaker that doesn't have his own speaker grill behind the screen, they have this optional black backing cloth. So Seymour AV certainly does. If you're going with Elite screens, they have an optional black backing. Illusion Vision has an optional black backing. So that's how I would handle this. I mean, I might go for Roxel anyway, just because it keeps its shape. It's really easy to deal with. And like I say, it's not black, but it's sort of a grayish color. And I mean, Roxel, it's a little bit more expensive than just the pink stuff, the cheapest pink stuff, but it's not crazy expensive. And like I say, it's easier to deal with, especially if it's going to just kind of be left exposed and standing on its own, under its own weight.
Yeah, that's the only thing I'm concerned about is it like you would almost have to build bays in order to...
Yeah, or some webbing or something to kind of hold up the fiberglass stuff. So I think I would just get some basic bats of Roxel. It doesn't have to be the one that's marketed as being soundproofing. There's no difference acoustically. It's pure marketing on that front. Just get your basic Roxel, put the bats in there. They can stand under their own stiffness and rigidity. They're grayish in color, and then get the black backing on the back of your acoustically transparent screen. I think that's all you need.
So he says he's in Florida. It would be preferable to use metal studs rather than wood. Tom knows the deal. Tom absolutely does not know the deal. But I will take your word for it, sir. Would there be any problem using metal studs for his false wall? Now, is he talking about like metal framing, like the whole thing is metal, rather than it being 2x4s, or...
Yeah, it'd be like metal 2x4s, the metal stud construction.
I literally don't think it matters one bit.
No, that wouldn't matter. I mean, it's certainly strong enough to hold a projection screen. It's not that,
right. It's not going to be
it's not that type of weakness. So that's absolutely fine. I would maybe caution on the fronts of the metal studs that you actually paint those black, because that might show through like speaker grill cloth, because it is silver. It's just aluminum. So that silver, if you shine a light on it, that might actually bounce back through. So but I mean, it's easy enough to paint the faces of your metal studs. That's not hard. That I might actually do, interestingly enough. When we're talking about,
if you're feeling lazy about it, you can just buy the black gaffer's tape or the duct tape or whatever, and just put a line of that down there, so you don't have to paint and wait for it to dry.
But I'm just thinking, just cover the shiny silver face of the studs. Gaffer's tape would be
might want to do that with wood anyways, to be honest with you. I mean, because it's yellow or whatever. But doubling up the speaker grill cloth on that same location probably does the same thing, and it's a lot cheaper and easier, but it's up to you.
In Canada we use hockey tape, that's for darn sure.
There you go. We've
all got a whole bunch of that somewhere in the basement.
hockey tape. It seems like a lot of people are going for a really big field of view. His target is 45 degrees. Is his target 45 degrees too small? He wants to use one of the new JVC laser projectors, so he's a little bit limited by the available throw distance in terms of how big the image can be. Do not listen to anybody else's field of view. Do not, and, and I can't stress this enough. Do not look at the size of your wall and say, how big can I go? Because that's a surefire way to nausea. I like, so you're sitting, it looks like, what, 11 feet? Is that what I didn't really look.
No, that's a little over 11 feet from the physical front wall.
Yeah, so 10 feet.
9.5 feet, basically.
9.5 feet from a 110-inch screen.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be fine. For most people, that's a good field of view.
You're exactly where I would want to be.
You can kind of figure this out for yourself, though, too, right? We've talked about this a lot. Projecting the image up on the wall and then just, figuring out what field of view you liked from that. And then you just, you're going to move that screen into the wall, however many, a foot and a half. Well, then you can now make the adjustments to the size.
Yeah. And also, when you go out to the movie theater, if you like to sit 2/3 of the way of the length of the theater from the screen, so you look at the length of the entire room, and if you're 2/3 of the way into that, that's where you like to sit, then you like about a 45-degree field of view. That's actually what the standard is in the commercial movie theater. But if you're the person who likes to sit closer to the screen, nothing wrong with that, but you like a larger field of view. If you like to sit right at the back of the theater, you like a smaller field of view, and nothing wrong with that either.
But if you look at your if you look at how you've got everything set up as far as your couch and everything else, you have some wiggle room as far as your couch placement. Like, you could move that couch forward 6 inches and it would be fine in relation to all the rest of your speakers. Yes, your surround speakers might get a little bit too far back, but then again, maybe you don't mount those until you're absolutely sure where you want your couch to be.
Also push the couch back 6 inches, and that would be perfectly fine. And
perfectly fine there too. So you've got a little bit of wiggle room as far as your setup. You're not trying to perfectly place 2 rows of seats in a room that's barely going to fit them. You've got some wiggle room. So if you put this 110-inch screen in here and you go, it's a little too big or it's a little too small, you can fix that by adjusting where your seat is just a tiny bit.
But I target 45-degree field of view for myself, so I have no beef with the people like, I love 50, I love 55. I'm like, great. When you go to the commercial movie theater, you sit closer to the screen than I do. That's also good. Otherwise, everybody would want to sit in the exact same row. So it's good that some people have some differences.
Yeah, somebody's got to sit in front of me and behind me.
That's right.
Not everybody can sit in my lap.
That's
not how this works. He says, even though his speakers won't be quite as close to the corners as they look in the diagram, they'll still be close to the front and side walls. How much of a problem is that? With the amount of base room treatments you're planning on having in here, I'm not worried about it. I would just make sure you hit that first reflection point, and then don't worry about it.
In this instance, I would also, he is planning to put insulation on the physical front wall that's behind the false wall, so that's good. And have some on the side wall that is directly beside the speaker as well. That's also going to be hidden by your false wall, so I don't see that as being any sort of a visual eyesore. And he was probably planning to do that anyway, if we're being honest. Now, if he had come in and said, I have no plan for room treatments, either I don't want them whatsoever or I have no idea what to do, that's not the case. But if he had said that, then we would have been saying, okay, you just want to make sure you have at least 4 inches of absorption behind and to the sides of those speakers that are going to be close to the corners. But he's already well prepared to acoustically treat this entire space. So that's really all you got to do. And when you do that, won't be any problem.
I'm not worried about this at all.
No.
I'm really not.
In a way, it's better to have the speakers closer to the boundary with the insulation than have them in the awkward area where they're like 14 inches away from the walls and the walls aren't treated. That's like actually worse than having them close to the walls and treated.
Right. David, we mentioned last week that for some reason the newest Pioneer receivers only have a global crossover instead of independent crossovers for each pair. Why is that a drawback? He's using a global crossover. He said it based on the best frequency for integrating his main left and right speakers with the subwoofers. It sounds perfect. So why would he want to change the crossover point for each pair of speakers separately? Is there a chance that doing so would open a whole new can of worms? Well, I don't know why I would open worms, but So obviously speakers all have different capabilities, and your surround speakers in particular tend to be smaller and less capable than your main left and right speakers, and often your center channel as well. So they don't play quite as low, which would sometimes make it more beneficial for them to have a crossover that was a little bit higher in order for the subwoofer to pick up some of those frequencies that they're not doing so well. You are saying, somewhat defensively, it seems, that
I don't know. I rewrote it, so maybe it wasn't.
It's good enough for me. How come it's not good enough for my kids? As all of Gen X apparently is screaming at the top of their lungs these days. I don't agree with that. There's no reason why we can't have better options later. We don't all have to keep riding our skateboards 5 miles to school like I did when I was a kid. I don't make my kids do it, but I could. So I guess where I'm going with this is it is mostly fine. I think in most cases, you aren't really going to notice a difference. But
if all of your speakers are capable of playing down to 80 or 100,
right.
Some of your speakers are capable of playing lower than that, but all of them are capable of playing at least that low,
right.
then the idea of having a global crossover that's set at 80 or 100 is going to be great. You don't need to do anything else. It's when you have some much smaller speakers that maybe the lowest they can go is 120, 150, something like that. Maybe that's your Atmos speakers. Often it's your Atmos speakers that can't go any lower than 150, 120 or something like that. I think the simplest way to conceptualize it is if I played a sweep out of any single speaker channel. So I just pick an arbitrary speaker channel and I play a full frequency sweep out of that. That sweep should play all the way from 20 kilohertz down to 20 hertz. There will be a point at which it crosses over to the subwoofer, but that should be a nice, smooth, even sounding sweep through any speaker that I choose. So again, if all of my speakers are capable of playing down to 80 hertz, and that's where all of them cross over to my subwoofer, even though maybe some of them, the speaker itself could play lower, but all of them cross over at 80, then I can do that. I can play that sweep out of any given speaker channel, and the sweep sounds good. But if I have speakers that are less capable, they go down to 150, and then they roll off steeply, I'm going to have a hole in that sweep. The sweep is going to go down, and then there's going to be some frequencies missing, and then the subwoofer is going to pick back up. So
and mostly you won't even notice it, though, like during
most
playback.
Content, you won't notice it, but conceptually, the idea is I could play that sweep out of any individual speaker channel and have a continuous, even sounding sweep throughout. So that's where the individual crossovers for each channel pair can be a benefit, because if my rear height speakers only go down to 150, then that's where I would want to cross the subwoofer over to them. I think when he's saying would that open a whole new can of worms is if we go back several years, there was sort of the theoretical worry that if you have a different crossover for different speakers, that somehow it's going to mess with like the phase of the bass that your subwoofer is playing and all. It's all nonsense. It's all waves do not like. If two waves meet at a point in space and they cancel at that point in space, it's not that the waves now cease to exist everywhere else. Waves just pass right through each other, and the only place where they cancel is in that specific point in space where they're overlapping and canceling each other or doubling up and getting really, really loud. Everywhere outside of that specific point in space, those waves are still, they just pass right through each other as though they didn't exist. So the idea that you can't have different bass frequencies being sent from different channels all to the same subwoofer, that's somehow going to mess up the sound, absolutely not the case. You can add mathematically, you can just add all of those waves together, and you're going to end up with a complex wave that the subwoofer plays, and it's still going to contain all of the information that it should. So it is no extra can of worms if you have different crossovers for different speaker channels, but you might not need it. In your case, if all of your speakers are happy playing down to at least 80, a global crossover is going to be great.
The other, so this is that what we've been talking about up to this point is the most common thing that you worry about, which is missing frequencies because your speakers can't play low enough. There is the less common problem with a global crossover, which is you have a set of speakers that play just fine down to 80 and maybe a little bit lower, but when you cross them over at 80 with your subwoofer, you can run into having issues with your with the bass as that crossover happens. So sometimes people will adjust the crossover just for those, usually your main speakers, just a little bit lower, so that you let the bass, so whatever problems that you're having at that point with this, as it crosses over the subwoofer are, basically you eliminate them that way. That's much less common. We've heard that happen a couple of times on this podcast, but for the most part, people set it to 80 and never really think about it again, which is just fine. I mean, I might as well have a global crossover. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I think my surrounds, because they're the Prime satellites, they're all set to 100, 120, or whatever whatever Odyssey set it to, or whatever Denon set it to, and that's perfectly fine. I don't even think about it. But for the for my main speakers, I just set it right back up to 80, and it sounds great. So I could have a global crossover, and I probably wouldn't notice the difference. But for those people who are really going to be neurotic about it and really listen and really, or maybe they only have a single subwoofer and they're trying to integrate it as best they can, and they need to have as much ability to adjust that crossover based on how the sub is interacting with the other speakers in the room.
And in the specific case of these brand new Pioneers versus the Onkyos, the reason it came up is because if the Pioneers were $100 less expensive than the Onkyos, and the one feature missing is that they had a global crossover instead of independent crossovers, we'd be who cares? We'd be saying, who cares? But the weird thing was the Pioneers cost $100 more than the Onkyos, and the Pioneers are the ones with the global crossover, so that's why it even came up.
When was the last time a receiver came out in the last 5-10 years that didn't have individual adjustable crossovers? It is so weird to have it not be there. It's like having a car come out without power steering. Like, when was the last time a car was released without power steering? I mean, I can't remember.
And if that one cost more than the one that has power steering, you'd be like,
it's like if Teslas didn't have power steering, it would be like, what is going on with this car? Joseph has moved into a new house, and he now has a dedicated media room. The dimensions are 17 by 26, and he can close all the doors so that it's completely enclosed. He has installed a 135-inch screen, and he's sitting 15 feet away. He has positioned his speakers just in front of the screen, so those are about 14 feet away. He's got a 5.2.4 configuration at the moment with dual SVS PB2000 Pro subs, 4 Sonance in-ceiling speakers, and then the DefTech speakers that he's owned for years. For his floor level, the 4 BP 9040 towers for his front, left, and right, and surrounds.
Tower surrounds here.
Tower surrounds. Didn't read my article. Plus CS 9060 center.
I mean, the thing was, as I've mentioned before, with the DefTech bipole speakers, sometimes the only way to match the way the front sound is with the exact same speakers in the surround position. So maybe that's how he arrived at that. I wouldn't even blame you. It would kind of make sense, honestly.
So back when he bought them, he was new to home theater, and he thought that having subwoofers built into the speakers was a great idea, but he figured out pretty quickly that that wasn't the case. Hence his dual PB2000 Pro subs now, and all of the speakers are crossed over at 80 Hz. He's got a $5,000 budget, and he'd like to put it towards a speaker upgrade. We always talk about acoustically treating your room and emphasize the first reflection points. It seems to him like the DefTech bipole speakers are meant to reflect sound all over the place, since they fire just as much sound out the back as they do the front. A design that I wholeheartedly support. If you have ever heard me talk about speakers at any point, I have always said, where sound really needs to come out? The back of the speaker. That's the big
Just
point.
like when a human being turns around and faces the other way and talks, it comes just out the back of their head, just as much out the front of their head.
That's right.
Perfectly normal.
That's how sound works. that's how things are supposed to work. As much as people love DefTechs, and I think that DefTechs make some perfectly fine speakers, and even these speakers can be perfectly fine in the right situation. I think that any speaker who has a design such that you almost have to build your entire room around them in order to make the speakers sound good is a bad design. I just think it is. I think that the speakers should be more flexible than the room they go into. So do we agree with his thinking that more directional speakers will be a good thing? Absolutely not. I think you should definitely keep these speakers. Now that we have formats like Atmos and DTS:X, you absolutely. If you're willing to get rid of these speakers, I would 100% eBay these bad boys, or Craigslist, or Facebook Marketplace, or whatever they're using. The kids are using these days to sell things. I think, like I said, these are popular speakers. I think a lot of people will like them. I think a lot of people will be really happy to have them. There's, I don't begrudge you for having gotten them, and I'm happy that you have gotten to the point where you're like, you know what, I think I want to change. Clearly, what we're going to tell you to do, and what I'm going to tell you to do, is immediately go to SVS and order some Ultra bookshelves, because this room is not big enough that it needs towers. So some Ultra bookshelf speakers, and just AB those with the DefTechs that you have, because it is a easy thing to do, You can send them back for free. No money out of pocket, basically, within whatever the return
You're
time
just
frame
going over all the coming up questions. But
well, I don't care. I don't read these questions before now. But that's what I would say. I would say yes. I would say that you should go ahead and get directional speakers. And that's what I would recommend you do. Immediately order something from SVS, just so that you can say, and it's not that you're going to keep the SVSs. SVS must hate me saying this, but I don't care. Because what you really want to do is get an experience with a speaker that is meant to be flat and is of the type of speaker that you are going to be looking at. And you've already got experience with SVS, so you're comfortable, ordering from them. Order in some of their speakers, take an AB, and just say to yourself, okay, is this what I'm looking for? If it is, great. You can send them back, go shopping around your local area, or order some different speakers in and start A-Bing all kinds of stuff. But just get ready to get rid of those DevTechs is what I would be doing. So
yeah, I certainly think it is definitely worth audition time. I'm not going to tell you what you have already can't possibly be improved upon. It can be, in my opinion. So yeah, certainly worth an audition.
He asked, secondly, do we agree, even though the DevTechs cost around $900 each, that a lot of that cost was going into the self-powered subwoofers and a second set of drivers facing out the back? So if he gets new speakers that cost about $1,000 each, but all of that is going to front-facing drivers, he'll still be getting an upgrade. I mean, there is cost associated with the amp and everything else that went in there. So there's no doubt in my mind that you can, if all you're getting is a single woofer and a single tweeter, which is what is inside the Ultra bookshelves that I was just talking about, you certainly have a lot more money to spend towards those things and the crossover components and the enclosure than you would in something that the DevTech can still try to make money off of it. So in theory, yes, I would agree with you. I don't know that it's always in actuality. I know that there's some speakers out there. I don't want to name names, but there are some speakers out there that are so incredibly overpriced for what you get that I would say that wasn't true. But in the case of any speaker that we're going to recommend to you, it probably is. Yeah, I can't do the general thing of just price is the pure indication, because price is arbitrary. You can put whatever the heck price you want on there. It could be $5 worth of parts and put a $1,000 price tag on it. But if we're talking about reputable, well-made speakers, then yes, if you have many fewer components going in, then each of those components could cost more than if you have a whole whack of components and the same budget to work with. So yeah, I agree. In theory, that might be the case. It's not going to be quite a blanket statement, but I think what he's getting at is he's keeping the budget for each speaker pretty close to the same. So is it possible to get an upgrade over what you have? It's not even so much that I think it's going to be a matter of, everything is an upgrade. You are definitely going to get something different than the way that your DevTech bipole towers sound. And you are going to get something. Since I'm not going to let you buy towers to begin with. Right. And you're going to get something that objectively is more accurate to the original signal. Now, whether or not you'll prefer that at first, I have no idea. That's why it's worth an audition. But we can definitely say you can get a change for right around the same budget. You keep saying no towers, but he's 17 by 26 and sitting 15 feet away. Yeah. I'm going to say towers are okay in this scenario. Yeah. He's far enough away in a big enough room. I'm okay with towers in here. 15 feet away. Yeah. Or you can get bookshelves and an amp. So you'd want good-sized bookshelves, though. You'd want I'm only recommending good-sized bookshelves. Yeah. $1,000 each, they're going to be. Yeah. So he finds the Hyperion Veris 3 Grand V6, but they're up to V6? What could they possibly have changed in these things that make them so actually, they're up to different? V8 now. So are they really? Yeah. Only for the tower. They got the big V8 towers, but they got the V6 towers, too. Okay. Series speakers appealing, and he's aware of SVS's offerings too. He knows both of these companies offer free two-way shipping, so there's really no risk giving both a try. But his fear is that he'll purchase new speakers only to find that don't sound much better than what he already has. So I'd like to hear our opinions on what changing from his DevTechs is going to sound like. Also, he's open to other suggestions. The room is mostly used for TVs and movies, but he does like to sit down and listen to music in there as well. So what's our take? I mean, okay, so the Veris towers are $2,500 a pair. I'm guessing that's a pair. It's not each, right? Yeah, that's a pair. Yeah. Yeah. So, and they're on sale, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like they were normally $29.10. Who prices speakers
I
this way?
don't know.
Yeah, it's very strange. Yeah. So what Rob's saying about towers is, fine. Is fine, I guess. I think that most of these speakers, even without an amp, you're not really, unless you're really pushing reference volume all the time. I don't think that you'll have a problem with with bookshelves, with the larger bookshelves for all of these speakers. I've owned obviously the V1 Varus Grand towers and bookshelves. Heard them both. They both sound great. I would no problems with you taking a look at those. Like I said, the SVS Ultras would be a good match as well. What do I think that you're going to hear? I don't know. Okay, you will hear something different. The DefTechs aren't really meant to be super linear anyways. They have their own kind of sound, and then you add in the fact that it's got sound bouncing off the back wall and everything else that's going on. I don't know what you've experienced up until this point. It's going to be different, and that's going to be the hardest thing that I can warn you about. Is sometimes and oftentimes, as humans, when we hear something that is different than what we are used to, we almost immediately associate that with an emotion, and that emotion can be it's different, so therefore it's better, or it's different, or therefore it's worse. A lot of times with sound, different means worse to us. So that's why you'll get people who are brand loyal with like Klipsch and stuff like that. They love Klipsch. I've owned Klipsch my entire life. I've listened to other speakers. I don't like them. I'm like.
And interestingly, more accurate and lower in distortion, often at the very, very first blush impression is there's less sound here. Which in a way is true, right?
It's not untrue, right?
If you don't have distortion means there's stuff there that shouldn't be there. Or, I mean, it could mean there's stuff missing, but when we're talking like harmonic distortion, it means there's stuff there that the signal didn't actually say to play. The speaker just made it extraneously. But when you hear it perfectly accurately without that harmonic distortion, there's less sound. When you hear less distortion in your bass, it sounds like less bass, because we associate distorted bass with loud bass.
We've said this 1,000 times. When you get that second subwoofer and you set it up properly in your room, everybody's like, I don't hear any bass anymore. I'm like, no, you're not hearing bass you weren't supposed to be hearing. And now you're not hearing overblown bass in some frequencies and no bass in the other frequencies. What happens is you sit there and they're like, I don't hear it. I'm used to there being all this weird rumbling going on in my room. There's no rumbling going on until the bass is supposed to be there, and then suddenly it's blowing you out of your seat.
Going to direct firing speakers, accurate direct firing speakers from bipole speakers that are reflecting sound, I mean, it's going to sound like less sound. I mean, the whole way DefTech markets themselves are, it makes your room sound bigger. Well, I mean, because there's literally echoes being produced that aren't in the signal, but they're coming there from the way that the speaker is making the sound in the room. So it might sound not as big, but it should sound easier to delineate stuff, because you're not getting the time smearing that's happening from those intentional reflections coming out of the DefTechs.
So while you are waiting for your whatever speakers you decide to order so that you can compare them to the DefTechs, what I want you to do is get some 2-channel music that's well recorded. It doesn't have to be even all that well recorded, but some well recorded 2-channel music where you can sit down and listen to it with your DefTechs over and over again, a couple of times a night until your speakers get there. Okay, whatever speakers you order, and I want you to listen as deep into the music as you can. You're listening for instruments behind instruments. You're looking for like a lot of times when the guitar string is plucked, there's the initial sound, but there's also a lot of other little things that tell you it's a guitar string that got plucked and not something else.
You can hear like the fingers moving across the string, the fingers moving across the frets. But you should be able to choose one instrument among all the instruments and follow it. If you're losing that instrument amongst the other instruments, that's something to listen out for.
So, and we were doing this, and you're doing this so that you can get familiar with the piece of music, you can get familiar with how it sounds on your speakers, and then get these other speakers in there, and then try to do the same thing, okay? And see if you hear deeper into it, see if you how you experience it, and that way. That, I think, will help you get past there's not as much sound in here. But
I definitely don't think it's going to be Yeah, I definitely don't think it's going to be a case of you get these and go, I don't hear any difference. I think you're going to hear a difference.
Yeah. All right, let us know how it goes. John. So this might not be in our wheelhouse, but is there any particular networking gear that is especially well suited for home theater? Okay. In his current setup, which has become a bit cluttered and oversized after adding it to it over the years, he's got a 16 port, TP-Link gigabit switch, which is bulky and overkill and doesn't even have power over Ethernet, which he needs for a handful of his devices. He's also got a TP-Link AC4000 tri-band Wi-Fi router, which seemed good for a while, but now it's buggy, and he really just needs a Wi-Fi access point for devices like his Roku that can't be hardwired. He prefers to hardwire whenever possible. His house has something of a network nerve center that branches out and covers everything, including his home theater, so getting it right is a must. He's looking at switching over to Ubiquiti.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm going to call it.
Yep.
Ubiquiti Unify OS networking system. He'd be able to view and configure everything from their app, and he likes that all of the hardware is smaller and modular so that you can just add what you need, exactly where you need it, including power over Ethernet injectors, small USB-powered access points, and every type of network-connected monitoring device you could want. Is there any reason that home theater and audio would require something different? I mean, the only thing that we care about with home theater and Wi-Fi and all that is the ability to get enough bandwidth to stream, 4K and HDR and all of that stuff. So if you can do that over Wi-Fi, I can't really understand if he is hardwired or not in this home theater. It doesn't sound like it.
Well, I mean, for devices that can, his AV receiver, his television, those types of things, he would be. But for something like a Roku that doesn't have the ability to put in an Ethernet cable, then that has Wi-Fi. I mean, given the image that you've got, you do have your Wi-Fi router.
Image.
Oh, I didn't include it. Sorry.
No image.
Oh, well, I'm showing it on YouTube. Your Wi-Fi router is like inside of a metal cage. I'm like, so you've got like a partial Faraday cage going around your Wi-Fi
Faraday
router?
Cage? Or you...
Like that Wi-Fi router should be at the very least sitting atop that cage. Having it inside the shelves of a metal wire cage probably isn't helping your Wi-Fi signal very much. But I mean, there's no special home theater or audiophile networking to be done. You just want solid connection like you would to any device. And honestly, I mean, I'm not familiar. I haven't used the Ubiquiti Unify OS system at all, but from what I could look through online, it looks like a nice, like for somebody who wants to do IT at home and wants to have it modular and wants to be able to track every individual device on the app and do the settings all there and have a graphic interface and everything. It looks pretty darn nice. It honestly does look pretty darn nice. So there's no reason why one person's 12 port switch shouldn't work as good as another's, when they're all gigabit rated. I see no reason why this Ubiquiti system would be a problem. So if you're happy with it, I say go for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you just take that other thing out of the cage and
that might help you. That might be all you really need to do.
Yeah. So the Unify Flex Mini access points say in their specs that they use a maximum of 6.5 watts and they're powered via USB. He's got a U-Green 40-watt USB-C charger that can deliver 20 watts to each of its two charging ports. Would he be able to power two of the Mini Flex Mini access points with that? Would anything get burnt out? I don't see any reason why you can't just plug this thing into this thing that you're talking about. I mean, it's got more than enough watts, so it doesn't shove 20 watts into each of your devices and set them on fire. It gives it however much it needs, right? Isn't that how those?
Yeah, the issue would be if it couldn't deliver at least 6.5 watts. Yeah. If it couldn't deliver, or if you had one that was rated at 8 or 10 watts, but it was dividing that between two ports, 5 watts to each port, then that might be an issue. But you've got more than enough. Having more than enough power available from the charging ports is not a problem. Yeah, it's just
when
like
you have less
wattage in your amplifiers. It doesn't push it into the speakers and blow them up. So this is perfectly fine. That should be no problem at all.
He asks, lastly, any advice on where to get headphone cables that are physically more robust and will last longer? He's using balanced signals, so he needs a 4-pin XLR to 4-pin. I thought they only had 3 pins. Anyways, to dual 2.5 millimeter headphone cables. He's gone through a couple of offerings in both cases where the cable goes into one of the 2.5 millimeter connectors, starts to wear over time. Seems like it's a weak point. So we know of any cables of this type that will last longer. Should he just put on his own shrink tubing? Would applying his heat gun to the shrink tubing potentially damage the wires or connectors inside? Okay, so shrink tubing is certainly a solution here, and you know, anything to reinforce that connection and to stabilize it is.
I might even like just manually electrical tape it first and then put some shrink tubing over that to just make it look nicer.
I will say that I have so I've got the PM2s, the Oppo PM2 headphones, and I've had a short in one of the 2.5 millimeter connectors that goes into the, so it goes two 2.5 millimeters into a single, you know, 3.5 millimeter, and then it has another cable that comes with it that has it's much longer and braided and thicker, and it has a 1/4 inch at the end of it. So my short cable with the 2.5s to the 3. I've had a short for a long time. I have a friend who's like, "Oh, I'll solder it for you. It's no big deal." I'm like, "Great," and then I can never remember to give him the cable, and it's never happened. So I went online last week and looked for a cable, and holy crap, the cables that I found were like $900.
Oh, jeez.
they were all like these high-end oxygen-free copper, silver-plated, gold-tipped, you know, audiophile grade cables, right? I was like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ludicrous. I am not paying, you know, and they weren't all that expensive, but they were all like $140 or above. You know, I'm not paying that.
No.
So I ended up on eBay and I ordered something 18 bucks.
Yeah.
18 bucks.
Sure.
It hasn't arrived yet, but I mean, it looks like the exact same.
Even that's a tidy profit, but okay.
It is a tiny, that person is making money. I did not rip that person off. So I do like your idea of shrink tubing. I think that Rob's suggestion of just manually wrapping it in a
because I mean, like just putting the shrink tubing on there, that's not going to really provide you a whole lot of strain relief, because like the friction grip on the cable itself, just from shrink tubing, that's not going to be all that strong. But I think, like he said, he had a couple that they worked perfectly fine. It's just over time there was this point of where I don't have a place I could point you that I feel confident where I'm like, oh, this is going to last you 10 years. Like I just don't know of any offhand where I mean,
these cables inside there are like tiny.
Oh, they are super thin gauge.
These are not robust cables.
No.
It's not like you're going to be able to buy 10 gauge headphone cables. It's not something that exists.
So I would suggest get one of the ones that you've already tried and were happy with in terms of, you know, it's the right length, it fits, you know, right performance and all that you already know. And then, I would just manually wrap it in I mean, not a ton, you know, just some electrical tape that goes around the cable part itself and then up onto the existing strain relief. And that's all held tight with the electrical tape you put on there, and then it put some shrink wrap tubing over that. I mean, if you hold the heat gun there long enough, I guess you could damage the connections. But if it's just to the point of shrinking the shrink tubing, if you're worried about it, use a hair dryer instead of your heat gun. Lower heat, it'll still shrink the shrink tubing, and that'll be fine.
Longer.
Yeah.
Josh, who's a member of our 2 Hour Plus Club, Josh says, right off the bat, we can say that we already know the end of the story, and Josh ended up buying a 77-inch LG C1 OLED. A better deal came along than what was originally available when he sent the email, so he pounced.
Yes.
Right. So whatever.
Happy ending for him that we already
don't have to answer his stupid question. Now let's skip it. His initial question might still be something others are pondering, and that's whether the C1 is worth the price difference over the A1.
Yes.
So the C1 over the A1.
Both OLEDs, but C1 versus
OLEDs.
A1.
So Josh has an Xbox Series X, and he was aware that the A1 is 60 hertz only and cannot do 4K 120 or VRR of any kind. He was prepared to live with that when he found a great deal, like we said, on the 77-inch A1. I'm sorry, he was prepared to live with that when he found a great deal on the 77-inch A1. And the price difference between that and the C1 was going to be over $1,000, which is a sum of money that people care about. So he ended up paying more, like about $600 more for the C1 in the end, and that was more palatable to him than $1,000. But the original question still stands. So for the benefit of others, what's the breakdown? Boy, if this isn't a Rob question, I don't know what it is. I'm getting some more coffee.
All right. Yes. So, I mean, the very obvious one, the A1 is limited to 60 hertz. Now, there is the caveat in there that if you feed the A1 a 24 hertz signal, you know, from your Blu-ray player or from one of the streaming services, and the initial signal is 24 hertz, it does play that back judder-free. I'm not sure if it goes to 48 hertz or 72 hertz, but it does manage to show 24 hertz contents without judder. So it isn't actually locked at 60 hertz 100% of the time, but it is definitely not a 120 hertz panel. So one of the other things then is that if you're watching, say, cable, that's coming in at 1080i, it will not do inverse telecine. It will not take 1080i 60 and convert that down to 24 and then show that without judder. And it can, of course, go up to 120 like the C1 can. So if you're watching cable, you know, an interlaced signal at 60 hertz, that will have judder in it. But yeah, if you're feeding at 24 hertz, you can still get a smooth-looking movie experience. So obviously, you're not going to get 4K 120 and variable refresh rate, but you know, I said in my initial email back to him, I'm like, honestly, with the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation 5 doesn't have VRR anyway, variable refresh rate anyway. And then when you put your games into 4K 120, you always have to take some kind of graphical hit to do that. Whereas if you set them to 4K 60, you get the most beautiful graphics, and so far, they've been like really, really rock steady at 60 hertz. So to me, it was like, you could do 4K 60, no VRR, and still get a really nice looking gaming experience. In fact, the most graphically beautiful gaming experience, because there was always that hit to go up to 120. So I was like, when there's $1,000 difference, like those are really the differences right there. The A1 in the measurements from all the reviews that are out there, so not just a select one where maybe it was just that particular panel, all of the reviews, the A1 has measured not as bright as the C1 in HDR mode. We're talking like, you know, 100, 150 nits difference, which outside of a side-by-side comparison, you're probably not going to see, but it does seem to be the case that the A1s are not as bright. But that wouldn't be a reason to me to spend $1,000 more, because like I say, outside of side-by-side, you're not going to notice it with your eyes. So, I mean, the thing is, the A1, if it's a sizable price difference, I'm like, you're really not giving up very much. Not truly. Like, if it bothers you that you don't see all the green check marks in the Xbox menu when you're like, what can this TV do in the Xbox menu? The C1 will light up every single green check mark. And if that just makes you feel good and that's worth a few $100 to you, well, there's that argument. Honestly, the one thing that I think is worth the most in getting the C1 over the A1 is that the C1 uses the Alpha 9, I think they're up to generation 4 now, but it uses the Alpha 9 processor, and the A1 is using the Alpha 7 processor, and LG always releases the newest firmware for the Alpha 9 processors first. If there's going to be any updates, any fixes, they're going to come to those Alpha 9 processors first, and the Alpha 7 will lag some months and sometimes never behind, because there's always people who got like the B series OLEDs, you know, in the previous years, and some feature update would come to the C series and G series and E series models and the W series models, and the B series like wouldn't get it, or they would get it like 8 months later, and those B series owners were always complaining. So if there was anything, that's why very often the price difference between the A1 and the C1 is like $200. And in most cases, I'm like, probably just pony up the extra $200 and get the C1, because you're always going to have the latest updates and you're going to have all the latest features. But for $1,000 difference, I was like, yeah, you can justify getting the A1 over the C1. But anyway, he ended up paying more, $600 more, got the C1 anyway. So he's got all the green check marks. So for him specifically, moot point. But yeah, that's the breakdown.
Bob has a Sony ES receiver, and he wasn't very happy with his old subwoofer, so he upgraded to an SVS PP2000 during their Black Friday sale, but something seems to be amiss. He connected the sub and ran his Sony's auto setup feature. Even with the PP2000 volume knob set up to about 3/4 of the way up, his Sony maxed out its trim level and the subwoofer still sounds quiet. He does have an unusual setup where the subwoofer cable comes out of the Sony receiver, gets converted to Cat5 for about 40 feet inside the wall, then converted back to RCA cable for the last 30 feet. So he's thinking something is going wrong in the signal with that back and forth conversion. Is that the question?
Well,
no, there's more.
Yeah, there's more. Yeah.
So is there an easy way to test the RCA subwoofer output on his Sony just to make sure the problem isn't right at the source? Maybe plug in a voltmeter into the RCA jack. Wow, how would I address this? How would I do this? I mean, I would just set the... I mean, the test tone should tell you, right? You should be able to hear the test tone as it comes out of your subwoofer.
Yeah, but obviously his receiver and subwoofer are physically far apart in his setup. My thought was like, neither of these is super convenient, but I would either bring the subwoofer to the receiver or I would unplug the receiver and bring it to the subwoofer. And I would just...
Obviously the other way, yeah.
Yeah, I would just directly connect the two of them together and just see if that works, because then if you're very sure at that point that the subwoofer RCA jack on your Sony is working and the PB2000 that you bought is working, then we can be pretty sure it's something in that Ethernet to RCA cable conversion that's going on where some
that's what I'm saying, right?
Lost. Yeah.
So if you just have it do the test tone, like if you just manually go to the test tones and say play a test tone through my subwoofer, and the subwoofer in your room, and it should be loud. I mean, the test tone should be 75 dB. I mean, you could use your phone app or whatever. You're not looking for a huge, you don't have to know exactly, have it be exactly right. You're just trying to look to make sure that it's about right. And then you pick the subwoofer, you unplug it, you pick it up, you take it back to the receiver, you unplug it from the wall, and then plug it into the Cat 5 converter and plug it directly in the subwoofer, and it's louder. I mean, I think that I don't think you need a meter for this. I think you need ears, and you will hear the difference.
I think he was trying to avoid the physical inconvenience, because PB2000 is not an insignificant thing to haul to wherever the receiver lives. It's not. If it's super big and heavy and you have to go upstairs or something to do it, it might actually be easier to just unplug the receiver and bring it to the subwoofer.
I mean, if you have a pair of computer speakers almost always take RCA, right? So you could do the same thing with that, because it should sense into full range just to test it. And it could be, you could unplug the RCA from the subwoofer output and put it into like the center channel output and test it that way, so that you're only sending one signal.
I don't think his Sony had pre-outs for all the channels though.
Well, might not.
So yeah, I mean, because the thing is, the voltage is variable. Like that's what the trim level is adjusting, and that's what the volume knob is adjusting. So I'm not even sure what your voltmeter should read coming out of that RCA jack, because the voltage is variable. So that I mean, the thing is, if you do hook up a voltmeter and it's shockingly low, you're down into single milliwatts or something, then that indicates there's something wrong with the RCA jack. Because I mean, it should be in the like single digit decimals, like a 0.1, 0.2 volts upwards of about maybe 2 volts at the most. It should be sort of in that range. So if you're getting like millivolts of power, then that would indicate something. But what the exact number should be, I wouldn't even be able to tell you, because it's variable. So I think it's just physically bring the sub to the receiver and do the regular. I guess
you could, if you could do the voltmeter thing, you could do it at the
directly
RCA
out of the sub versus at the end of the RCA cable going through the conversion. See the difference.
See the difference there. So directly out of the subwoofer output. And if you, that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
So unplug the cable from the converter box, test it right next to the receiver, plug it back in, go to the other end. And test it there. And if they're not the same, that's the problem. And if they are the same, the problem is your receiver.
Well, if they are the same and low, then it's the receiver. If they're the same and like, if you're getting 1 volt or more, then it's not the RCA jack.
I wouldn't think so.
I doubt it's the subwoofer itself. I highly doubt that from SVS. It's not completely impossible.
It's not impossible, but it's improbable.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, look for the difference between straight out of the RCA jack on the back of the Sony versus having gone through the Ethernet conversion.
That really feels like that really feels like it's the weak link in here. Assuming that the problem is the RCA to Ethernet conversion, which wireless subwoofer kits do we recommend most highly again? Well, SVS has 2.
Yes.
They have their tri-path one, which is the more expensive, the more powerful one, and then they have their regular one. And honestly, you can order both and send back the one that doesn't work, that you don't need.
I don't like the form factor of the regular one, so
sort of whatever.
Yeah,
it's a lot less expensive though.
It's
like almost half, I think.
But I also like the Outlaw, the OAW4. I like the form factor of it. So the Outlaw. So I think the original SoundPath wireless kit it's like $100, isn't it? 90 or $100. Something along those lines. And then the Outlaw, the OAW4, that's $130. And then the TriPath, the SoundPath, or Tri-Band rather, the SoundPath Tri-Band is $200. Now that said, if you're having issues of some kind, that Tri-Band, if the Tri-Band SoundPath wireless kit from SVS doesn't work, pretty much nothing is going to. That one's been really darn good. But yeah, you could give any of those a try, though. Those are the ones we recommend. All right,
Angel. When buying a second subwoofer, does it always need to be an identical match to the first sub? Angel has an SVS PB1000 in a 10 by 16 by 7 foot room. Would matching it with the PB1000 Pro be any sort of problem? So I have an article over at AV Gadgets called "Mismatched Subs Don't Do It," and it is not about never having identical subs. Never not having identical subs.
Never not having. Yes, the double negative.
There needs to be a double negative in there. So it's not suggesting that you have to have identical subs.
Yeah, like literally identical. They don't have to be literally identical.
So this is the way you think about this. So you understand what the thought process is before we tell you the answer, which is you can go ahead and buy the sub. Yeah. So the thing is mismatched subs means that one sub is playing when the other sub is not. Okay, then you have one for some of the frequency range, you have two subs, and for another part of the frequency range, you only have one.
Yeah,
that is a mismatched sub. Okay, so if that happens and it's a hertz or two and it's below 20 hertz, no one cares. Okay, that is not a problem. But if it's happening, one sub cuts off at 35 or 40. Because it's some home theater in a box piece of crap that you got from your uncle who upgraded, and then you buy a SVS sub and try to pair them, they are mismatched. There is, 20 or 35 or 15 hertz worth of time at the lowest end, or worth of frequency response at the lowest end where the SVS is by itself. Those are mismatched. You should not use them together.
You should replace the first one with the second one.
Right.
In that instance.
You still only have one sub.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. But with the PB1000 versus, pairing it with a PB1000 Pro, or even a PB2000 or a PB2000 Pro or whatever, they both go down to 20 hertz and maybe a little bit lower.
And in this room size, we want each sub individually to actually have enough output for the room size. Because when you have the two subwoofers across the room from each other, which is how we always say to set them up, because in our mind, the point of the two subwoofers is not really to get louder, it's to get more uniform throughout the entire room. So when you put the two subwoofers across the room from each other, they don't really get much louder. So you're not really looking to enhance the amount of bass that you're getting with the second subwoofer. You're just trying to get much more uniform bass throughout the entire room. But a PB1000 and a 10 by 16 by 7 foot room already has plenty of output. So the PB1000 Pro can play even louder than the PB1000. But I mean, that just means the PB1000 Pro in your room just has more headroom that you'll never actually use. But in terms of their extension, and both of them are capable of enough output for your room, so those two can play perfectly fine together in your room. If you had something like an SB1000, the original SB1000, and you were like, can I pair that with a PB16 Ultra? They're both SVS. It's like, no, those are mismatched. There's significantly deeper and way louder output. And let's say you're in a much larger room and you're just like, can I take what I already have and just make it better by adding this monstrous sub to it? Do I still have two subs? No, you'd be better off replacing the smaller sub with the bigger sub in that instance. But in your scenario, you can absolutely put a PB1000 with a PB1000 Pro. They do not need to be literally identical.
So the two things you're looking for is extension that is fairly close to matching, and the ability to pressurize the space by itself.
Yeah.
Okay, those are the two things you're looking for in a subwoofer that you're going to pair with another subwoofer. So if you have a sub that is too small for your room, you're replacing it. If you have a sub that can't play nearly as low as the new sub, you're replacing it. If it's both of those things, you're definitely replacing it. So that's what you're really looking for. Bertrand in Quebec. Quebec. I feel like I should be speaking French or something. Bertrand managed to get in touch with Steve the Geek from NextGenHomeTheater.com, who also lives in Quebec, and Steve lent him his measurement mic so that Bertrand could take his first ever room EQ Wizard measurements. He got 8, oh, this is that really black theater. He got 8 acoustic panels in his small blacked out theater, each with 3 inches of insulation plus an 1.5 inch air gap. So we can see that he's got the measurement microphone pointed straight up. It's on his seat in his main listening position. I guess there's 3 seats. So it's in the middle seat.
Yeah, tripod.
And it's a good 12 to 8, so maybe 12, at least 12 inches from the headrest. So and everything.
Just an example photo. He did go in all 3 seats, but just an example photo of. He's like, I'm taking my first ever room EQ Vision measurements. Here we go.
So he measured in each of his 3 seats, and since he uses a Mac and followed Rob's Room EQ Wizard tutorial, it wasn't too bad, but he does have some questions. First up, his Marantz SR8015 receiver had a firmware update not that long ago. He follows our advice of setting all speakers to small and gives them an 80 Hz crossover, but he checked his settings and things were all over the place. With his front speaker set to large and various crossover frequencies of all kinds for all the other speakers in his 5.2.4 setup, would the firmware update have done that? I mean, yeah.
No. Well, no. I mean, I'm thinking at some point you reran Odyssey. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking at some point you reran Odyssey. And I mean, look, it wouldn't be unreasonable for a person.
It makes me want to check my settings. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah,
it makes me want to check my
It wouldn't be unreasonable for a person to say, I ran Odyssey, then I manually set all my speakers to small. It set my front, left, right to large, and I set them to small. And it gave, my center a 60 hertz crossover, and I set that to 80. And then I reran Odyssey later because I had moved some stuff in my room. Doesn't that, what I set as far as the speaker being small and the crossover being 80, doesn't that stick around? I just reran what I already did. No, every time you rerun Odyssey, it resets all of that stuff. Yeah. And you have to manually set the small and the crossovers again. So that's most likely what happened. If you had assumed that what you had set manually would stick when you reran Odyssey, I don't blame you. That's not an unreasonable thing to have assumed, but it is not the case.
Have you thought about buying a $200 Multi-Q X app?
That doesn't necessarily.
At least you can go see it in real time, though.
That's right. That's right. So I'm pretty sure that's what the firmware update shouldn't have done that. But if you've ever rerun Odyssey from the first time that you manually made those changes, then those changes were wiped out with the.
I'm gonna be dead honest with you. I agree, Rob, with what Rob's saying is that it shouldn't have done it. But if somebody came to me and said
that's what happened, it wouldn't.
It's totally happened.
Yeah.
If somebody from Denon contacted us and said, "Just so you know, our firmware update resets all of Odysseys," I would have been like, yeah, I could see that. So, yeah. So with his Mac set to output 8-channel PCM, which is 7.1, and using Room EQ Wizard output selection, he can choose to output a test sweep from any of the individual floor-level channels. But is there a way to output from the individual overhead channels? I do not know.
No, there isn't at this point. That would take some operating system level updates in both Mac and Windows. I'm not aware of any way to do that right now. We're stuck with the 7 floor level plus the subwoofer output for the time being.
So when he set test sweeps out of his surround channel, some of the sound came out of his overhead speakers at the same time. Is that normal? Is that supposed to happen? Do you have up mixing engaged? Because that's what I would think is going on there.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be the natural culprit.
Yeah, like you don't. So I'm pretty sure this is just a listening mode selection, but you don't want to use direct mode. I know it might seem like, hey, I'm just playing sounds out of one speaker at a time, so don't I want to use direct mode? You do not, because that would disengage all of your bass management and Odyssey EQ, and that's kind of the point, is confirming that stuff with Room EQ Wizard, so you do not want to use direct mode. However, you also, on a Denon or Marantz, do not want to use auto mode, and you very well might have your listening mode set to auto, because the auto mode in Denon and Rant always defaults to applying some upmixing.
Right.
That's what the auto mode does. So what you need to do is make sure that the listening mode you're using when you're running Room EQ Wizard is, it should say multi-channel or mult-chan, mult-ch. That should be what it says on the front panel of your Marantz receiver. That is the only acceptable listening mode for this. So I'm pretty sure that's what went on there.
Yeah. So when he looked at his waterfall, this is my favorite part, by the way, when we start looking at the graphs and people freak out.
Yep. You always do your first time. You can't help it.
This is where it is. Think about
they're squiggly.
The first time you've done anything, including that one thing that you were dreaming about doing since you hit puberty. That first time, you didn't really know what was happening, but you were excited that you were there. You were excited to be part of the whole experience. And that's kind of what running your first graphs are, and looking at them the first time. But then you freak out and you don't know how to handle it. So here we are. When he looked at his waterfall graph, he saw some long decay times in the base, primarily from 10 hertz up to about 100 hertz, and that had him a bit concerned. But then he measured just his ambient noise floor, and it seemed that, despite all the soundproofing construction that went into his theater, having the HVAC system in the room directly next door means that he has a constant noise floor, particularly just below 60 hertz, where it's a little over 60 dB. So here's his noise floor here. And, yeah.
And where the noise floor is peaking is where his frequency response is peaking in the waterfall plot.
You see that waterfall plot. Okay, so those of you who can't see this, there's a fairly straight line down to about 350 hertz, and then there's a little bit of a bump up, which goes into about 100 hertz, where it bumps back up, and it's mostly around. And it almost, if you look at the graphs, if you look at the graphs here, the waterfall graph, where the waterfall shows over time how long the ringing is in your room.
Right.
The peaks in the noise floor and the peaks, the longest length of time for the waterfall graphs are 1-to-1 matching.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So you're actually measuring with your waterfall graph your noise floor. Is what you're measuring as it goes up.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm really glad he did that.
Yes. It would have been very confusing otherwise.
It would have been tough. And the thing is, if he's saying, A, if you're worried that the soundproofing you didn't do too much, or B, you're like, how come I haven't really noticed this? Because 65 decibels at 70 hertz, you don't hear that very well at all, man. You really don't hear that very well at all, our human ears. The microphone is picking it up. The microphone is like, yeah, I can pick that up, and we're seeing that. And he's like, I seem to have infinite decay time at some frequencies. How can that be? Well, yeah, you got something next door that's making some rumblies, but honestly, it isn't really a problem. You know, if your human ears aren't picking it up, or if this is a constant sound that's low, your brain is so good at just tuning that out after a certain amount of time with it. So, I mean, I know it looks scary in the graph. I don't blame you, but honestly, it's not really a problem. That's the good news.
Right. So, let me see. He measured each of his 3 seats and got the following graph. So, we're looking at these graphs. They kind of overlap. There's some ups, some downs.
Yeah.
Mostly stays flat within, 5 to 6 dB.
And we're seeing 3 overlapping graphs. These are the 3 seats. So I'm not actually sure exactly which speaker this was that he was measuring. But these are the 3 seats overlapping each other in the graph that's being shown on YouTube.
So in one measurement, right around 100 hertz, there's a huge dip. And right above 100 hertz, it's a huge dip. And then another measurement right below 100 hertz, there's a huge dip. And then the last seat, just about 90 hertz, there's a little, but 85 hertz, there's not quite as bad a dip. But then they all peak right at 80.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right where that crossover is, they all peak right there. And then, it stays kind of okay until it drops off at 20 hertz, essentially. If I'm reading this right. And he's got the graph going all the way down to -2 2 or something. Is that what that is?
No, it's down to 2.
Is it down to 2? I can't tell if that's a 3 or a 1 in front of that 2. That's why I was a little confused. So yes, there is definitely a bit of a peak at the 80 hertz where the crossover region is into your subwoofer, and there's a bit of a dip right beforehand for everything. So one of the things I'm going to say first of all is that the measurement. Well, am I supposed to keep reading here?
I mean, we kind of just covered it there, but there's a few little details, so maybe yeah.
All right. So I'll read the rest of this and then I'll comment.
Yeah.
The 3 lines are for his 3 seats, left in orange, center in blue, right? No one cares. While it looks a bit squiggly above 200 hertz or so, it's actually all within a pretty reasonable plus or minus window, but he's seeing a pretty big peak in all 3 of the seats right around 75 hertz and a pretty big, call 80, man, and a pretty big dip in all the seats around 85 to 100 hertz. Yeah. He does have his 2 subwoofers, each getting their own trim level and distance settings using Odyssey Sub EQ HT. And as mentioned, his front speakers got reset to large somehow. So he also initially planned to have bass traps in all of his corners, but hasn't gotten around to making them, installing them yet. So what's going to help the problem frequencies that he's seeing in this graph? Well, so many things. First of all, this crossover region is having all sorts of issues here.
Right.
That's the above and below.
I mean, honestly, that's the only issue in this graph.
Really,
is the crossover region. Because
if you look at the before to from 20 hertz all the way up to 20 kilohertz, and you just take out this 80 to 100 hertz section, it's pretty dang good with a big bump at, what is that, 25, which he probably put in there himself.
Probably.
So,
and it's very consistent. I mean, what's nice is your bass, I know there's, that region between 40 and 60 hertz where they're not perfectly overlapping. But honestly, that's within plus minus 3, plus minus 4.
There's so many. So these are the things that will fix this graph. First of all, reset your crossovers and engage all that. That's gonna make a big difference right there. You can I think if you just did that, this graph gets better.
Probably.
Okay? That alone.
Almost certainly, really.
Okay. Bass trapping in your corners. Stop procrastinating and do it. Not because it's going to make this graph that much better, but because it's going to make your experience that much better.
Yeah, because your current panels that you have, 3 inches of insulation, inch and a half air gap, that's good. That's getting you down towards 100 hertz. It's not really getting you anywhere below 100 hertz. And that's where everything is right now in these graphs, is below 100 hertz. So those corner bass traps that you always plan to have all along, you'll want them. You'll want them. They will help.
And I know that they call the Odyssey, and everybody calls it, put them in each one of your seats. But the real measurements, the way that you're really supposed to take them, is not in each one of the seats. It's within 18 inches of the first measurement that you take. It's all supposed to be around there.
Which, at least in his case, he's got a 3-seat couch essentially. So you're gonna be pretty close if you did the 3 seats. That's not a tremendous issue, but. Yeah, I honestly, I think you're way closer and way better off than you might be worried, because everybody sees their graphs the first time and they're not a perfectly flat line. They don't all perfectly overlap. And theoretically, that's what we're aiming for. But you're within a very nice window for the vast majority of it. It's right in the crossover region, which we expect to be the most problematic. You had a weird thing where something got reset in your settings anyway, and that might be enough all on its own to fix a lot of this. And if not, the corner bass traps you always plan to get are going to be a help in that region. That's exactly why we want them. So I think you're much, much better off than you might have feared, which is good. It's good that the graphs showed that.
Good. Last question here, Karl. So Karl says, over at the Bright Side Home Theater podcast, I never really heard of it. Is that a podcast? I haven't heard of that podcast. Some dude named DJ has, of course, been talking about his Lumagen Radiance video processor. And since he's had a rep from Kaleidescape on as a guest a couple of times, just trying to butter these guys up to give you one, are you? Is that what you're doing over there, DJ?
He says he isn't, but, the subtext. The subtext.
I don't know. I wouldn't trust anything he would say. He's obviously a sellout. He's excited about getting a Kaleidescape system at some point, too. Yes, I wonder how. So that's DJ's point of view over there. But what do we think about Lumagen and Kaleidescape, specifically pairing them with one of the new JVC Laser 4K projectors, which Karl intends to install in his Phantom Black Theater? Boy, if anybody didn't need to have an image processor, be the guy at the Phantom Black Theater, to be honest with you. But, okay, so there are lots of reasons why you can make a justification for a video processor. Video processors have been around for a very long time, and there have been quite a few instances where video processors were highly needed. And it's mostly when a new technology comes out that is, shall we say, poorly implemented, or at least not implemented as well as it's going to be in a couple of years.
Say something like HDR tone mapping on projectors. You can make the argument.
You can make the argument, and it works. But do you need it for a JVC projector? Would be my question, and my answer would probably be, probably not. But it depends. You know, you could
very much depends. Yeah.
You know, there's source that you're going with and everything else. You can make the argument that now those things cost multiple thousands of dollars if I'm remembering correctly. I have no problems with somebody saying it's important to me. I have the money. I'm going to buy it. Fantastic. Knock yourself out. For most people, I'm going to say you don't really care that much. You don't care as much as you think you care, and you certainly don't care the price that you're going to pay for the video processor. Yeah,
it's always really funny to me when I trying to discuss the Lumagen Radiance processors, because the internet being what it is, people want you need one, it's the only way to get a good image, or you should never get one because they're overpriced and nobody needs one, as though there's nowhere in between.
Right.
And this absolutely lives in between for me. And I even, in talking to DJ about it, and because, I mean, he always references you know, his calibrator that he's known for, you know, going on 20 years, and they're friends at this point. And, you know, his calibrators suggested getting this, and not for, I'm just going to make money off of it. You know, I looked at it, I said, if I were a video calibrator and I were trying to give my clients the very best advice that I could, I might suggest, you know, my clients get a Lumagen for a very simple reason. They can then go get whatever projector they want.
Right.
And I am going to feel confident as the calibrator that I'm going to be able to max that projector out, whatever it might be, if they've got a Lumagen. And it might even, in the long run, save them some money, because let's say they go get a brand new projector that I, the calibrator, am not super familiar with. It's going to take me some time working on that projector to max it out. And a lot of times the settings in your projectors they have some idiosyncrasies. You know, you'll get something dialed in perfectly, and then you go adjust something else in the color or the gamma or, you know, the black level or the white level that technically should have no impact on that first thing you adjusted, but sometimes it does. You know, you adjust the red and it ends up throwing off the green. Why? Not exactly sure. It's an idiosyncrasy, but sometimes that happens. It might take me, if it's my first time calibrating a brand new projector, it might take me a solid, you know, 5 days of work to maximize what I can get with the available controls of that projector. If they've got a Lumagen, all I have to do is set that projector to cast its native colors as wide as it possibly can. They wouldn't be accurate, but just throw out all the color you can, get the light output where I want it to be based on whatever lamp settings I want to use, and just get that thing throwing as much as wide as it can, and then I can dial it all in with the Lumagen. And if I'm already familiar with the Lumagen, I can do that way faster than learning the idiosyncrasies of a new projector. I can also, if you get a projector that doesn't have frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, the Lumagen's got that. If you're setting up a constant image height setup, maybe with a lens, the Lumagen is going to process all of that stuff beautifully, you know, and make sure that it's scaled properly, that you're not losing detail, that you're maximizing the performance in a constant image height setup. It can do the thing where it can help you move the subtitles if they're below CinemaScope aspect ratio screen. Like, it's got all these features where I can totally make the argument, particularly if I'm a calibrator, and trying to give the advice that says, honestly, this is the fastest, most surefire way that I can guarantee you getting maximum performance out of whatever projector it is you choose to buy, even the JVCs, right? So I can get on board with a calibrator having said that, and it's not nefarious. It's not trying to upsell you on something you totally don't need. There is genuine value there. Right. But if it's me, if it's Rob buying a projector, and it's my projector, I'm going to dig into the idiosyncrasies. I don't really need a Lumagen. I'm also not going to do a constant image height setup. I'm going to have IMAX be 16:9. So, you know, for me, the value wouldn't be there for a Lumagen. But DJ, interestingly, as much as he's into home theater, doesn't really like doing all the setup himself. He would rather have his friend, who he's known for 20 years and does it professionally, come in and do it at a cheaper rate.
I would rather have his friend do it for me too.
You know,
so if he wants to come over here,
I'll
be happy. I'll be happy to give him a beer or whatever it is that DJ pays him.
So I mean, a bit of it is who's doing the setup, who's digging into the idiosyncrasies. How much time do you have? How much do you want to dedicate to this? I would say that if you are willing to put in the time and you are willing to dedicate yourself to whatever your idiosyncrasies the brand new laser JVCs might have, you can get them on a 16:9 screen looking every bit as good as what you could achieve with a Lumagen. I don't agree with DJ's take, and it's always weird when DJ, makes a proclamation without having seen the alternative. I'm like, I don't agree with his take that the Lumagen can make it look better than the JVC can look by itself. But I could say it could potentially make it look better than the JVC all by itself more easily. That's a possibility. But if you're willing to put in the time and deal with whatever settings you have to deal with, I will claim that the JVC is capable of looking every bit as good without the Lumagen as with the Lumagen. But there's the time factor involved.
Right.
That's not nothing. That's not nothing.
He also asked about the Kaleidescape, right?
And the Kaleidescape. So that's
I mean, again, Kaleidescape is, to me, now I haven't looked at a Kaleidescape product in a really long time, but to me, Kaleidescape is for people who don't want to do an NVIDIA Shield and put all the work into it.
There's definitely that. And they do have the argument of they actually have some versions of movies in their library that aren't available in 4K HDR anywhere else, not on disc, not from any of the streaming services, because they actually get their movies directly from the studios, and sometimes they have versions that aren't available anywhere else. They also get the mezzanine files, which is like one step below the master file, and they do their own compression on it rather than relying on an already compressed version that was given to them by the studio or something like that. So on a technical level, some, it's definitely not all, but some of the movies that they have at Kaleidescape are actually the best technically, the best version you can get anywhere. Sometimes you can't get another 4K HDR version anywhere else, but that's not every movie. And then they have the flip side, which is they have no Lionsgate titles. I can't figure out why Lionsgate doesn't want to work with them or hasn't been able to reach a deal. There was a time when Paramount wasn't on Kaleidescape either, but they got Paramount eventually. They've had them for years now, but Lionsgate isn't there. So there's no John Wick movies. There's no, the Hunger Games movies. The Lionsgate title. Those just aren't on Kaleidescape whatsoever until hopefully one day they get Lionsgate signed up. But yeah, I cut Tom off a little bit there, but
that's okay.
That's
I'm used to it.
That part of it.
Rob being a rude Canadian again, as he is. Now he's got control over Optimus Prime. Now he's going power mad.
But there's a part of me that honestly, if I had all the money in the world, I would have a Kaleidescape system. I would, because if I just
all the money in the world, I have a lot of things I don't currently have, including probably an NVIDIA sheet.
And
I would have it and not use it, but I would have it at least.
I've said to DJ, I can get to where Kaleidescape is trading money for time. If you don't want to rip your own movies, if you don't want to manage your own server, hey, let Kaleidescape do it. You'll pay more. But honestly, the price they charge for each movie is really reasonable on Kaleidescape. Sometimes to buy the movie from Kaleidescape is cheaper than buying it anywhere else, including the disc or buying it from Apple or whatever. It's so there's trade-offs there. The initial upfront cost is higher, but if you factor in time and sometimes the availability of individual titles and the price of individual titles, there's a trade-off there too.
I mean, I can't tell you. I've been in this business for a really long time. And there's a kind of a life cycle or an arc that we all go through as we get into home theater and AV and whatever industry or hobby that you're into, where you start off and you just believe the hype of everything and you get very excited about all of that. And there is definite advantages to having, like Rob's saying about Kaleidescape, there's definite, and you are trading money for time. There's advantages to having it. And I can tell you that they exist. And I can also tell you that for most of us, it's not worth the difference. I mean, if you're willing to, if you even want to have a server that serves up all your movies and does all this stuff, most of us are going to just do it ourselves, because it is some work, but it's not that much work. Whereas the people I know of that have Kaleidescapes or are really interested in this Kaleidescapes don't even know what they want. What they want is they want to have like a hotel. They're like, I like the thing they have at the hotel where you just select a movie and it starts playing. I'm like, you can't even articulate what it is that what it actually is, but you're willing to spend the money to get it, and then you're never going to understand it. Because you're not willing to understand it, and that's fine, but you have the money to spend on it. Most of the people who are listening to this podcast, and I will venture to say most of the people listening to DJ's podcast, are of the type who would be willing to do it themselves. DJ is very enamored, at least from this conversation that we're having, seems to be in that phase of this this arc where he's very enamored with all the new shiny things and gets very excited about them. I have seen so many.
It's not as though they're not nice, though. These are really nice things.
Shiny. I said they were shiny. They're shiny, and you get enamored with these things, and you're very excited about it. And then after you see enough of new shiny things coming out, and you see the luster wear off of enough of them over time, you start to be a little bit more wary of how shiny the new shiny thing actually is. And that's where I live. I live in this more, I can kind of see the future of a lot of products before they hit, and that's why I was tentatively excited about object-based audio, thinking I could see where the potential was, and then they just turned it into basically channel-based audio again, and I was mad about it. I mean, I know that it's not, it is object-based, and they can mix it object-based, but I was really looking forward to having a system where we could literally place a speaker wherever we wanted, and the system would figure it out. And we don't have that. We're not even close to that. So, I'm excited that DJ's excited. I think that's great that he's excited. I also think the rest of you don't need to be excited just because DJ's excited. So,
And I mean, Karl had in his email is like, if you look at the convenience of playing back, like let's say, Apple movies, right? Yeah. And let's say an Apple executive decides, we're Apple. We've got some money in the bank. What if we turned Apple movies into a service where either the bandwidth is now available to stream it at this quality, or we start allowing downloads at 4K HDR? Because, I mean, you can download 1080p versions from Apple movies right now. What if we started allowing downloads of 4K HDR versions, and we decided to equal Kaleidescape quality or even surpass it? Maybe we're using better compression, so the file size isn't enormous, but the quality is there. Could Apple conceivably do something like that in the future? Yeah, they could. They could decide to do that today if they wanted to. They do have the amount of money. So is Kaleidescape doing something that is technically impossible for anyone else to do, especially something like an Apple or a Google or an Amazon that has all the money in the world? Like, any of those companies could absolutely, they could buy Kaleidescape in the snap of a finger and not even notice that they spent the money to buy them, right? Like, that's the kind of money those companies have in comparison to something the size of Kaleidescape. So it's not that they're doing something technically impossible or utterly unique. They're doing something where there's a gap in the market right now,
which is great.
Yeah, which is great. It's for the people who want the maximum quality you can get at a price that isn't the red carpet system, the $500 per movie on premiere night that the celebrities have at home. It's not that. It's living in the in-between ground. It has to be the price it is because they don't sell very many of them, if we're being honest. So yeah, both of those things, the Lumagen, the Kaleidescape, to me, they live in the gray area. It's like, I can't justify it for everybody. It's for a specific group of people that it makes sense.
Those people you almost don't need to tell them, that it's for them.
Almost.
You know what I mean? They almost all know it already. Yeah. And are like, I don't have to sell people who own a Lumagen or who want to buy a Lumagen. They aren't sold on it. They find out it exists and goes, oh yeah, that's what I want. I want that. Right. That's what I need. I care enough
Odyssey
about
Multi QX. It's a similar thing. Even though that's a much different price point. It's only $200 compared to thousands of dollars of systems we're talking about with the Lumagen and Kaleidescape. But it's a similar thing where it's like, I can't even recommend the $200 price tag of that to the vast majority of people. Right. And the people for whom it's for, they don't need to ask. They see it and they go, that's what I want. It's worth whatever the price is. But all of them, I will put them all in the same container where you get a really good thing. So it's not a waste of money. It's not that you paid all this money and you got something that wasn't worth that money, or
Right.
you could have done it so much more easily for so much less. It's like, nah, if you want to do exactly what these things do, you get a really good result at the end of it.
I
For
agree.
the majority of people, it isn't the bang for buck solution. So,
Right.
yeah.
All right. Who do we have left?
We have a bunch, but we've got Brad. It's mostly updates about his garage theater. Billy. Let's see here. Scrolling down here. Jeff. That's revisiting his guest house thingy. Jason revisiting his basement setup. And was there one more at the end of that? No, two more. Jeremy in France and Jay. There we go. That's everybody on the list. We're going to start off 2022 with a backlog, but hey, it's AVRant. That's what we do around here.
That's right. This is also AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. I want to thank our listeners of the week. I want to thank Bob, Billy, and Jason for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and leaving us a PayPal donation, as well as our 137 patrons over at patreon.com, including Bertrand.
Yes, indeed. Bob, Billy, and Jason, thank you for your PayPal donations, and patreon.com/AVRant podcast is the place to go to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, and a big thank you to our 137 patrons over there, including Bertrand. Thank you all for the financial support.
That's right. I'm going to thank our listeners who send in notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, including Joseph, Martin, Jonathan, Bob, Angel, Brad, Infinite Gary, Zach, Billy, Gurinder, and Jeremy. Thank you for thanking us.
Yes, indeed. I'll say the names one more time here. Joseph, Martin, Jonathan, Bob, Angel, Brad, Gary, Zach, Billy, Gurinder, and Jeremy. We do appreciate those notes of gratitude and encouragement. It's really nice to have those. Of course, a lot of those were happy holiday messages. It's that time of the year. So, yeah, really, really nice. A big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. And Happy New Year, everybody. Here's to 2022, and goodbye 2021, 2022. Please be better. Please, please, please.
Please be better. For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.